Advancing with watercolor. Today we'll use the idea of tonal contrast to better understand how we can create a center of interest. We'll be using it for a rather dramatic scene, performers on the stage, taken from an image of musicians playing in St. Mark's Square in Venice. If you visited Venice and visited the square, you're probably familiar with this scene. They have a couple of competing cafes that offer musicians to the people who are sitting in the open air. And it's always a very lively scene, playing classical waltzes and other beautiful music. You can see the pose here. They're under the lights, very dramatically illuminated and really enjoying themselves. So when we're putting those sorts of figures, we need to do probably a little more drawing, getting the proportions, getting the instruments, getting the general feel that the musician is into it, enjoying the music. Once we have the drawing, though, we can start to place the lighter tones. And I'm altering the image by using more warm tones into the canopy, into the backstage, into the footlights, and even into the surrounding buildings and so on. But as I'm approaching the figures, you notice that I'm painting around them. When we're doing washes like this is a sort of a challenge to keep that, preserve that white and keep it shape, good shape, especially when we're using a large brush like this. So I'm going close to the shape, but I'm really staying just beyond the edges that I've drawn so that I can go back with similar hues and refine it later on. Worked with more of a yellow and cad orange on the left side. Now I'm going with a cooler red of alizarin crimson on the right side. Much deeper red, much more powerful red, especially when we're using it without much water. And this is helping to set up the some interesting shapes of canopies and foreground tables and staging. And then now you see the painting has dried off, and I'm going back into it with a darker mix of ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson, and here and there a little bit of neutral tint or black. I believe in the video when you see it, it looks almost just like a black, but as it dries you'll see those warm hues lighten, and the underpainting of alizarin crimson comes through more and more. The watercolorist counts on this. They have to have a little faith as you're painting these strong darks that they're going to dry with a little bit of transparency and reveal the underpainting that we created. This is what is going to result in sort of a feeling of a glowing light, a light that's emanating from the stage and from the footlights and causing the surrounding areas to appear to glow. This is exploited by using that underpainting, that very warm underpainting, and I'm countering it with combinations of warm and cool hues. I'm trying to achieve a graded wash from a little paler aspect up by the top of the canopy to a darker, richer aspect in the right and lower right-hand sides. And as it comes to bear on the figures, I have to be a little careful not to paint out a head, or, well, I guess I did paint out a head a little bit. But it's very easy to lose the positive shape that you want. And painting around your subject like this is one of the more difficult things we do because we need precision and we need some exactness, but at the same time we're working at a pace that is very fast, and we're trying to take advantage of the wet stage of the watercolor. So it's a tricky passage. And I tip the board and manipulate the color again to try and effect a graded feel to the wash behind, so that it's not just a flat wash, but that there's some changes from top to bottom and from left to right. Returning to the canopy now with a little bit of water. I want to add some darker, warmer hues to the top of the canopy and I want them to be soft passages. In other words, I don't want too many hard lines. I want it to kind of spread out and create a feeling of light underneath the canopy. That's the main reason for doing this. It's a very warm painting. I've taken liberties with the color because I think exaggerating the warm nature of the scene creates more of a feeling of luminosity, and that's one of the main things I'm after here, is to create luminosity. What helps me also are some soft edges. You noticed I just picked up a little pigment with the brush on that underside of the canopy. I felt that edge should be very soft, a transition from light to dark, but a soft transition. So I'll add a little water while it's still wet and soften it out. Now I'm creating the pattern of tables by introducing some dry brush done with alizarin crimson, but you notice that it's skipping over some very narrow shapes as I move it from left to right. And this is a great way to create these receding tabletops. A few rounded shapes in the foreground and a few smaller rounded shapes towards the background, coming up against the stage and preserving that broken white across the stage as you see it now. This is what's driving or creating even more luminosity. So at this point, I'm going to start working on some darker figures. The band is made up of 6. One is playing the bass, who I'm painting now, painting him as a dark against a little bit of a lighter area. I'm going with a very warm, almost cad red hue, and you notice with clarity the head, the hand, and the neck of the bass. As it comes down, though, he kind of dissolves into the bottom of the bass, and this sort of blending effect, making it less distinct below, is one way to keep it actually more entertaining. If I tried to paint all the strings and all the beautiful edges of the bass, could be too much detail. Some of those details could be added later, and that's in my mind, but for the moment I want to keep it like this and join that dark to the profile of the pianist at the piano. Painted with the same warm hue, a cad red with a little bit of ultramarine blue as it comes down into the shadows, and then using the top of the piano, the open grand piano, to highlight the flute player. So these darks are important, the darks that come into the stage, as well as the dark that's behind the stage. I'm keeping it purposely warmer and deeper on the stage and trying to evoke just a little coolness and a little softness beyond the stage. And then, of course, we have all these details of our main figures. I've tried to paint the shadows with a warm tone, tried to paint their faces with a minimal amount of brushwork. Important to me are the hands and the position of the head to express the sort of postures that we see. Musicians, the flutist has a typical, let's call it a typical position, where the head is cocked and the hands are resting on the flute. The clarinetist is really having a solo here, I believe, and he's got his back arched and the clarinet is raised a bit. The violinist behind him, we see the main hand with the bow. Not much of the fingering hand, but it's not all necessary. We don't have to show each and every part of it. I've left enough white, I believe, to give that area more draw, more interest, and painted in the audience with basically silhouetted shapes. We see the heads, we see the shoulders, we see references to the tabletops, but we don't see much more than that. I am counting on introducing a few highlights into the shoulders, into the any cups or bottles on the table. The tops of heads will have some highlights. This is just enough information, I believe, to give the scene, the sort of reflective glow that we see. So this is the finished piece. I feel the glow was captured. I think the musicians are good enough, and I'm pretty pleased that I was able to get a dark evening feel to the background and a sense of liveliness in the audience as well. So this is the painting and the band played on.